The house smelled of lilies and old wood. Outside, the funeral crowd began dispersing, their footsteps crunching down the gravel path my husband had laid 40 years ago. I remained inside, standing in the room where we had celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and Christmases. The same room where we'd once nursed Travis through pneumonia when he was 7. Now he stood before me, taller, broader, crueler. You drained his life. Travis snarled, his voice sharp with greed, not grief. Spent 40 years taking from him. Now you think you're entitled to the house. This house Dad built. I said nothing. My fingers traced the carved edge of the dining table, which my husband had crafted himself. I remembered him cursing at the sander, grinning when the varnish caught the light just right. Travis had never seen that version of his father. Too busy chasing jobs in distant cities, coming home only when convenient. Kelly's heels clicked sharply across the hardwood. He's probably turning in his grave, she spat, knowing you're still here, clinging to this outdated shrine. My hand tightened on the chair back. The silver, framed photograph of my husband still sat on the mantel, exactly where he'd placed it. I wouldn't let them touch it. I've already signed the transfer forms, Travis said with mock sympathy. The house, the car, the joint accounts, everything. You should look into assisted living. There's a place with bingo nights down by the freeway. Kelly laughed. Or buy a cemetery plot. Prepaid discount. It wasn't their words that hurt. It was the rehearsed coldness. They had planned this. My husband's body wasn't even cold in the ground. I turned to them and smiled gently, the same smile I'd worn when they threw tantrums as children. That smile made Kelly twitch. I said nothing. Not because I was weak, but because there was nothing to say to people who had already closed their ears. I walked to the fireplace, carefully lifted the photograph, and slipped it into my handbag. His smile held stories only I remembered. Taking one last look at the house, I walked out the front door into sunlight too bright for a funeral day. But they had no idea what I carried with me. 3 nights before the funeral, while Travis snored upstairs and Kelly raided the wine cabinet, I had found it exactly where he said I would, in the top drawer of his study. The drawer still smelled of cedar, ink, and peppermint gum. A golden envelope, sealed with wax. My name written in his trembling hand. Inside a silver key slightly worn. Trust documents dated 2004. $7.3 million in a separate fund under my maiden name. Ownership papers for a Nevada penthouse. No contest, no loopholes. And a letter. Eleanor, if they come for you, let them. Let them believe they've won. Let them strip the walls bare and boast of their conquest. Then go use what I've left you. Not because you need revenge, but because you deserve peace. You stood beside me when I was nothing. You held me up when the world broke me down. Now I give you a life that is yours alone. Seth, that night, I didn't sleep. I lay in our bed alone, hearing every creak in the hallway, every whisper of wind against the window pane. Travis and Kelly slept like they had already buried me. In the morning, I cooked breakfast, scrambled eggs, orange juice, and set the table. I even smiled when Kelly stumbled in hungover, barking at me for weak coffee. I watched her eat from the china set I'd bought with grocery savings in 1976, the same plates she'd called oogly. Just last week, I washed dishes, folded laundry, wiped their fingerprints from the counters. Then I went upstairs and packed 3 dresses, 1 coat, a pair of shoes, my photo, the envelope, and the letter. I waited until they left for another estate meeting, rushing to carve up what remained of my life. Then I made the call. As the car's still available. It has been waiting for you, Mrs. Caldwell. At exactly 3:00 p.m., a black limousine pulled into the driveway. The driver opened the door with quiet respect, his hat pressed to his chest. I stepped inside, and for the first time in days, I exhaled. As we pulled away, I looked back at the house, not to mourn it, but to mark an ending. The porch light still flickered. Travis had never fixed it. He never fixed anything. Las Vegas came into view around midday, the city rising like a mirage that refused to disappear. The penthouse was on the 33rd floor. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped into a world that had waited quietly for me. Marble floors, tall windows, a view stretching to the mountains. On the glass dining table sat a bouquet of dried lavender, my favorite. For the woman who remembered everything, even when no one else did. For the first time in days, I let myself cry. Not for what I'd lost, but for what I'd kept. The next morning, Travis and Kelly lounged in their kitchen, flipping through TV channels, when the news anchor's voice caught their attention. Nevada's most luxurious residential penthouse has just changed hands. The 33rd floor of the prestigious Asterion Tower now belongs to Eleanor Caldwell, widow of the late Charles Caldwell, founder of Caldwell Electrical Solutions. The camera showed me standing in the penthouse window, silhouetted by the desert sun. I wore a navy silk blouse and the pearl necklace Charles had given me when Mia was born. I wasn't smiling, I was simply present. Kelly choked on her toast. That can't be real. Travis dropped the remote, batteries scattering like marbles. That's some mistake. But it wasn't. The anchor continued, from a house quietly taken from her, to a view no one saw coming. Eleanor Caldwell's story is a reminder that sometimes the softest voices hold the sharpest turns. They arrived at the Asterion Tower within the hour, fury fogging their car windows. But the concierge barely looked up. Security guards stepped forward when they demanded access to the private elevator. "Your name is not on the residence access list," one guard said calmly. "I'm her son," Travis shouted. "I have every right." She specifically noted that visits from immediate relatives without invitation are to be declined. The elevator behind the guards opened. I stood inside, wearing black trousers and a lavender scarf, meeting their eyes through the glass with a look they'd never seen before. Calm, cold, unmistakably clear. "You're doing this," Travis's voice cracked. "You embarrassed us," Kelly hissed. "You lied to us." I tilted my head slightly. "I didn't lie. You didn't ask. We're family." Travis stepped forward. I smiled, but it wasn't warm. Family doesn't scream at a widow during a funeral. As the elevator doors began to close, "You say I've been silent all these years, but silence isn't absence. It's the space where truth grows." The next day, Kelly called my cell phone. "You think you've won, don't you? You think you can embarrass us on national television and sit up there in your little glass castle like some queen?" I didn't respond. "I don't care what he left you. People like you don't get to enjoy things like this for long." That night, an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a contract demanding I forfeit any public mention of financial details connected to the Caldwell estate. In exchange, an insultingly small payment. At the bottom, the next morning, the doorman called. "There's a man in the lobby. Mid-40s, leather jacket, scar under one eye." I told them not to let him up. 3 hours later, my security system glitched. He was inside the building. By the time police arrived, he was gone. But he'd left something behind. A silver lighter with the initials MG was placed carefully on the piano beside my husband's photo. The break-in was silent. No alarms, just the hum of systems temporarily paused. He moved through my home like a man who'd done this before. Quick, deliberate, confident. I waited in the corner armchair by the fireplace, lights off, moonlight filtering through tall windows. He walked straight to the piano, perhaps drawn by the lighter he'd left. Then he froze. His shoulders stiffened as he saw the photograph. An old picture of my husband and me at a summer fair, holding a child between us. A boy with scraped knees and a bandage over his brow. A boy we'd found crying near the freeway after being hit by a car. He fell to his knees. "Oh God, no, no." "I remember you." He turned. His face was older, harder, carved by life and regret, but the eyes were the same, wide, wounded. "I didn't know," he whispered. "You left this on my piano," I said, holding up the lighter. "And this was supposed to silence me." I showed him the contract. He shook his head. "They didn't tell me who you were. I swear. But you still took the job." "I needed the money." Kelly said it was just a scare job. No violence, just pressure. I stepped closer. "What's your name now?" "Mike. Mike Garcia. Been going by that since I turned 18. "Why didn't you leave when you saw it was me?" He swallowed hard. "Because I'm tired of being the weapon in other people's hands." Then he reached into his jacket, pulled out a second envelope. Everything they gave me. The contract, the cash deposit, and this. He handed me a flash drive. Audio recording of the call. Kelly's voice, Travis in the background. "You'll testify?" He nodded. "Under oath, under God, however you need me to?" The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the courthouse steps. I walked through, flanked by my lawyer Ardayan and Mike, who wore a navy suit and trembled slightly. Travis and Kelly sat across the aisle, surrounded by expensive lawyers who couldn't meet my eyes. When I took the stand, I looked out at the crowd, then at Travis. He didn't look back. They say I relied on them, that I was weak, old, and in the way, but I built the life they tried to steal. I held my husband's hand when we had nothing but dreams and bills. I cleaned houses, cooked meals, and saved pennies in coffee cans. When we finally had something, I gave it all to them. My voice didn't waver. When he died, they saw me as a leftover, like my love had expired with his breath. I didn't come here to punish my son. I came here because silence isn't always survival. Sometimes silence lets rot grow unchecked. Mike testified next, pulling out a folded photograph. That's me. That's her. That's the man who raised me better in one day than my father did in a lifetime. The judge reviewed everything for an hour before speaking. Eleanor Caldwell, the court recognizes the emotional, legal, and financial injustice committed against you. Your testimony was not only credible, it was courageous. She turned to Travis and Kelly. You used legal manipulation and coercion to isolate and control your mother. You treated her not as a person but as an inconvenience. That ends today. Travis's inheritance claims were revoked. Kelly received a restraining order. Both were ordered to pay $2.5 million in damages to the Legacy and Justice Foundation I established. Outside, reporters swarmed, but I said only this. I didn't win today. I remembered who I was, and the law finally did too. The weeks after the trial transformed everything. My penthouse became headquarters for the Legacy and Justice Foundation. My living room was filled with blueprints, laptops, and hundreds of stories from elderly people across the country who saw my face on television and recognized their struggle. Mike became the first director of security. He now wore tailored suits and carried a clipboard instead of threats. He greeted guests and escorted survivors to their first meetings with lawyers and counselors. On the day of our first press conference, reporters asked what I hoped the foundation would achieve. Recognition for the ones left behind. For the ones who fed generations with calloused hands and were repaid with neglect. This is a reclamation. That afternoon, a letter arrived. The handwriting was familiar, cursive, delicate. Mom, I saw you on TV. I didn't know what you had lived through. I thought your silence meant surrender. Now I see it was a strategy. If you'll have me, I'd like to come home. Love. Mia. She arrived 3 days later. Before she could speak, I pulled her into my arms. We cried, not just for time lost, but for truth found. You taught me something I didn't understand until now, she whispered. Silence can be a strategy, but only if it ends with justice. It was a quiet afternoon in Las Vegas when Mike and Mia married on the rooftop of the Asterion Tower. The ceremony was simple, sacred. A man who had been lost now found, a daughter who had misunderstood now returned, and a mother once discarded, now honored. During the toast, Mike raised his glass. When I was 12, I bled on the side of the road. No name, no family, no future. She found me, she gave me orange juice in her scarf. She told the ER nurse I was hers. Today I get to say it out loud. I am. Later that night, I stood on my balcony as Mia wrapped her arms around me from behind. If Dad could see this, she whispered, he'd be so proud. I smiled through tears that didn't come from sorrow. I didn't live for recognition. I lived so no one else would ever feel abandoned the way I once did. A week later, we launched the Second Chances Foundation, providing housing for elderly parents abandoned by their children, partnering with halfway houses, paying for therapy, legal aid, and dignity. On the anniversary of my husband's death, I wore his favorite scarf and read from a note he'd written. If they turn on you, walk forward, not in rage, but in resolve, and build something they could never burn. That night, standing on the balcony, I raised my cup of chamomile tea to the stars and whispered to the dark, silence can be misunderstood, but justice never needs to shout. It only needs time. Then I closed my eyes and breathed. Free.